The transport tube leading to the Galactic Council's primary reception chamber hummed with an otherworldly precision. Inside, Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood perfectly still, her cybernetic neural interface, invisible to alien scanners, collecting and processing terabytes of contextual data with each passing moment. Beside her, Lieutenant Commander Jack Rodriguez, her cousin and tactical specialist, adjusted the quantum adaptive fabric of his diplomatic attire. To the untrained eye, it appeared to be a standard formal suit. In reality, it was a marvel of human engineering. Fabric capable of real-time environmental adaptation, integrated communication systems, and micro-defensive capabilities that could neutralize biological, chemical, and energy-based threats within milliseconds. The youngest member of their team, Dr. Aria Chen, a quantum communication specialist barely 30 years old, ran her final diagnostics. Her augmented eyes, a seamless blend of biological and synthetic technology, flickered with holographic data streams only she could interpret. She represented a new generation of human specialists, individuals who saw technological boundaries as mere suggestions rather than limitations. As the transport tube decelerated, Elena reflected on the journey that brought humanity to this moment. 50 years ago, Earth had been a planet on the brink of self-destruction. Climate catastrophes, political fragmentation, and resource wars had pushed civilization to its absolute limit. But humanity's greatest strength had always been its capacity for radical transformation. The global crisis had sparked an unprecedented era of cooperation. Nations that were once bitter enemies now worked in perfect synchronization. The United Earth Coalition emerged not through political manipulation, but through a genuine collective understanding that survival required unprecedented collaboration. Technological breakthroughs came at an exponential rate. Quantum computing merged with advanced neural networks. Sustainable energy solutions transformed global infrastructure. Genetic research eliminated most genetic diseases while enhancing human cognitive and physical capabilities. What the alien civilizations saw as impossible, humans saw as merely challenging. The transport tube's doors opened with a near-silent whisper, revealing the Council's primary reception chamber. A massive holographic representation of the galaxy dominated the central space, with intricate light streams representing thousands of established civilizations. Humanity's representation was a mere pinpoint, a fact that would soon change dramatically. 12 alien ambassadors represented species that had dominated galactic politics for millennia. The Zorn, methane-breathing entities resembling crystalline octopi, occupy the central platform. To their left, the Shadow Collective's representatives flickered between corporeal and energy states, their very existence a testament to advanced evolutionary adaptation. The Krell delegation stood in sharp contrast, massive exoskeletal beings whose bodies seemed more mechanical than organic. Each movement was calculated, each gesture a product of millennia of refined diplomatic conditioning. They had not survived galactic politics by being unprepared or vulnerable. Elena's team moved with a synchronicity that immediately set the alien observers on edge. It wasn't aggression they projected, but a complex combination of preparedness, confidence, and something far more nuanced, a sense of potential energy waiting to be unleashed. Lieutenant Commander Jack Rodriguez carried a diplomatic briefcase that was more advanced than entire alien technological research facilities. Its quantum-locked contents contained not just diplomatic documents, but comprehensive data packages that could reshape entire economic and political paradigms. Dr. Aria Chen's augmented perception scanned the chamber, collecting microscopic details. Molecular composition of surfaces, electromagnetic fluctuations, quantum-level communication signatures. Nothing escaped her enhanced sensory capabilities. The alien ambassadors had prepared extensive protocols for this meeting. They had analyzed human communication patterns, studied Earth's brief interstellar communications, and developed intricate strategies for diplomatic engagement. They were about to discover that nothing could have prepared them for humanity. As Elena Rodriguez stepped forward, the entire chamber seemed to hold its collective breath. Her movement was deliberate, each step a calculated message. Behind the calm exterior was a mind that had been preparing for this moment her entire life, and the lives of generations before her. The first words would change everything. The silence that followed Alina's initial statement was more explosive than any physical detonation. Ambassador Krell-Vex of the crystalline hierarchy felt a quantum-level disruption in his neural pathways, a sensation he had not experienced in 3 centuries of diplomatic service. Dr. Arya Chen began a subtle activation sequence. Microscopic communication nodes woven into the diplomatic team's clothing initiated a complex information exchange. To the untrained observer, it appeared to be nothing more than a slight adjustment of clothing. In reality, it was a sophisticated data network that could instantaneously analyze and respond to the chamber's changing dynamics. Your council represents a fossilized system of interstellar governance, Alina continued, her voice modulated to trigger specific neurological responses in each alien species. Years of xenolinguistic research had prepared this moment. Each word was a precision instrument designed to penetrate deeply ingrained cognitive patterns. The Shadow Collective's representatives began to fracture. Literally, their energy-matter forms started to separate, a clear sign of extreme psychological stress. Ambassador Exadel, who had negotiated with over 200 emerging civilizations, felt something unprecedented, genuine uncertainty. Lieutenant Commander Jack Rodriguez activated a secondary system. A holographic timeline began to materialize, not just a display of technological achievements, but a living, breathing representation of human potential. Each milestone was interconnected, showing not just individual breakthroughs, but the complex ecosystem of human innovation. Quantum computing nodes demonstrated solutions to problems the Council had considered unsolvable for millennia. Climate restoration algorithms showed how humanity had transformed a near-apocalyptic planet. Medical breakthrough visualizations revealed genetic engineering that had eliminated most hereditary diseases while enhancing human capabilities. But this was more than a technological showcase. It was a deliberate deconstruction of the Galactic Council's fundamental assumptions. The Zorn ambassador's tentacular appendages began to secrete a rare biochemical compound, a physiological response to extreme cognitive dissonance. Humans were supposed to be a young, naive species. Everything in their diplomatic protocols suggested a predictable pattern of submission or confrontation. This was neither. Arya Chen's augmented perception captured microscopic details, the subtle electromagnetic shifts, the quantum-level communication disruptions, the biochemical responses. Each was a data point in a complex analysis of interspecies communication. "We are not seeking your permission," Alina stated, her words cutting through simultaneous translation systems with surgical precision. "We are informing you of a new galactic reality." Behind her, holographic representations began to shift. Economic models materialized, not static projections, but living simulations that showed how human economic strategies could fundamentally reshape existing interstellar trade networks. It wasn't a threat. It was a demonstration of capability. Ambassador Krell-Vex attempted to initiate a standard diplomatic countermeasure, a quantum-locked communication sequence designed to psychologically destabilize emerging civilizations. The system interfaced with his neural network, prepared to deploy centuries of refined psychological warfare techniques. It failed catastrophically. The human team's communication defenses didn't just block the attack, they reflected it. In milliseconds, the ambassador's own psychological manipulation protocols were turned back upon him, revealing deep-seated vulnerabilities in the crystalline hierarchy's diplomatic infrastructure. Jack Rodriguez allowed himself the slightest smile. Months of preparation, years of strategic planning, generations of human resilience, all converging in this singular moment. The Zorn's primary communication node began to oscillate erratically. Their entire diplomatic framework was predicated on a hierarchical model of first contact. Submission, integration, controlled development. These were the expected responses from a young spacefaring civilization. Humanity was rewriting the entire paradigm. Dr. Arya Chen's neural interface captured every microscopic detail, not just the verbal exchanges, but the quantum-level communication disruptions, the biochemical responses, the electromagnetic shifts. Each was a data point in a comprehensive analysis of interspecies communication that would revolutionize sinological studies. "We are not asking to join your council." Alina's final statement resonated through the chamber. "We are declaring a new chapter of galactic interaction." The diplomatic team stood in perfect synchronization, not as supplicants, not as conquerors, but as architects of a fundamentally new approach to interstellar civilization. The Galactic Council had never encountered anything like this before, and they were about to discover that humanity was just getting started. Deep within the Quantum Horizon Research Facility on Europa, Jupiter's enigmatic moon, Dr. Marcus Chen's team was already anticipating the next phase of their technological revelation. The facility itself was a marvel beyond conventional understanding. Its walls were composed of programmable matter that could reconfigure molecular structures in milliseconds. Each research module was a living, breathing ecosystem of innovation, where the boundaries between biological and technological systems had long since blurred. Dr. Imani Okoro, lead quantum systems architect, stood before a holographic representation that would make most alien civilizations weep with technological inadequacy. What appeared to be a simple quantum computational array was actually a multi-dimensional information processing system that could simulate entire galactic evolutionary patterns in real time. "The Zorn's communication networks are fundamentally linear," Imani muttered to her assistant, Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka. "They're still operating on three-dimensional information transfer, while we're exploring 11-dimensional computational matrices." Hiroshi's augmented eyes flickered, processing millions of data points simultaneously. His body was a testament to human adaptive capabilities, a seamless integration of biological optimization and synthetic enhancement. Nanoscale neural networks ran through his cerebral cortex, allowing instantaneous information processing that made traditional computing look primitive. The demonstration they were preparing would do more than showcase technological capability. It would fundamentally challenge the Galactic Council's understanding of intelligence, computation, and potential. A quantum entanglement network began to activate. Unlike traditional communication systems that relied on signal transmission, this network operated on principles that seemed to defy conventional physics. Information didn't travel. It simply existed simultaneously across multiple quantum states. Dr. Chen's primary project, codenamed Prometheus Nexus, was about to change everything. The facility's adaptive matter walls began to shimmer. What had appeared to be solid surfaces dissolved into intricate holographic representations of computational models so complex that they would drive most alien species to sensory overload. Each model represented a different approach to problem solving. Climate restoration algorithms that could reverse centuries of environmental damage. Medical nanite systems capable of complete cellular regeneration. Economic models that could predict and mitigate global disruptions with unprecedented accuracy. But this was more than a technological showcase. It was a deliberate deconstruction of the Galactic Council's fundamental assumptions about intelligence and potential. Imani activated the primary demonstration sequence. A holographic representation materialized, not just a visual display, but a living, breathing simulation of complex systemic interactions. It showed how humanity had transformed a near-apocalyptic planet through integrated technological and ecological solutions. Regions that were once ecological dead zones now flourished. Entire climate systems had been restored through a combination of advanced geoengineering, biological restoration, and quantum-level environmental management. What the Galactic Council saw as impossible, humans had made routine. Adaptive complexity, Imani explained to Hiroshi, is our true technological breakthrough. We don't just solve problems, we create systems that solve themselves. The quantum computational array began to pulse. Each cycle represented millions of potential scenarios, analyzed and processed faster than most species could comprehend a single variable. It was less a computer and more a living intelligence, a collaborative system that merged human creativity with computational precision. Dr. Chen watched from a secondary monitoring station. His team wasn't just developing technology. They were redefining the very concept of technological progress. A communication node activated, a quantum-encrypted channel that could transmit information across unimaginable distances without any traditional signal degradation. It wasn't just faster than light communication. It was communication that existed beyond traditional spatial-temporal constraints. Hiroshi's augmented perception caught something extraordinary. The computational array was no longer just processing information. It was evolving. Each computational cycle introduced subtle variations, learning and adapting at a rate that would terrify most technological surveillance systems. "We're not just showing them our technology," Dr. Chen murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "We're showing them our potential." The facility's adaptive matter began to reconfigure. What had been a research center now looked like a living organism, a complex, interconnected system that blurred the lines between technological infrastructure and biological intelligence. Each demonstration was a carefully orchestrated message. Humanity wasn't just technologically advanced. They were fundamentally different. As the quantum entanglement network pulsed its final sequence, Dr. Imani Okoro allowed herself a rare smile. The Galactic Council was about to receive a message they would never forget. Technology was no longer just a tool. For humanity, it was an extension of consciousness itself. In the sprawling digital metropolis of New Shanghai, the nerve center of Earth's economic defense initiative hummed with an intensity that defied traditional understanding of infrastructure. Dr. Lydia Nakamura, director of the Global Economic Resilience Network, watched as holographic displays traced economic currents like living, breathing organisms. Unlike traditional economic systems, this was a living intelligence, a quantum-adaptive economic ecosystem that could predict, respond, and manipulate global financial streams with unprecedented precision. "Activate Protocol Ouroboros," she commanded, her voice calm despite the magnitude of what was about to unfold. The system she had developed was far more than a mere economic defense mechanism. It was a sentient network that understood economic interactions as a complex, living system. Traditional economic warfare relied on disruption. This was something entirely different, a method of economic transformation that would render the Galactic Council's economic sanctions obsolete. Hidden within global communication networks, adaptive algorithms began to move. These were not simple trading bots or predictive models. They were intricate, self-evolving economic entities that could instantaneously analyze and respond to complex market shifts across multiple dimensional platforms. In the first phase, the system didn't attack. It adapted. Existing trade routes controlled by the Galactic Council began to experience subtle shifts. Quantum-encrypted communication channels emerged from unexpected locations. Economic nodes that appeared insignificant suddenly became critical junction points. Ambassador Exedal of the Shadow Collective was the first to notice something was wrong. The economic sanctions they had meticulously designed were being absorbed and transformed rather than resisted. It was as if the human economic system was a living organism, consuming and repurposing the very mechanisms meant to constrain it. Deep within secure server complexes, AI systems developed by a consortium of global economic think tanks began their work. These were not just computational systems, but complex neural networks that understood economic interactions as a form of communication. Dr. Nakamura's primary innovation was viewing economic systems as living ecosystems rather than mechanical structures. Each trade route was a neural pathway. Each economic transaction was a form of communication. The Galactic Council was attempting to impose a blockade. Humanity was creating a new form of economic dialogue. Quantum-encrypted communication channels began to proliferate. They didn't just bypass existing economic restrictions. They fundamentally redefined the concept of economic interaction. Trade routes that appeared on traditional scanners would suddenly shift, revealing complex multidimensional economic interactions that defied conventional understanding. The system Lydia had created was called the Adaptive Economic Resilience Matrix, AERM. It was less a defensive mechanism and more a living, evolving economic intelligence. In the first 72 hours, the Galactic Council's economic sanctions began to dissolve. Not through resistance, but through a process of economic transformation so subtle and complex that most species couldn't comprehend what was happening. Smaller civilizations within the galactic network began to take notice. Economic nodes that had been dormant for centuries suddenly became active. Trade routes that had been considered impossible began to emerge. "We're not fighting their system," Lydia explained to her team. "We're demonstrating a fundamentally different approach to economic interaction." The AERM didn't just defend. It evolved. Each economic restriction became an opportunity for innovation. Sanctions became pathways for new forms of economic communication. Ambassador Krelvex's economic monitoring systems began to show impossible data. Trade routes that should have been completely shut down were not just surviving. They were thriving. Economic nodes that had been targeted for isolation were generating unprecedented value. What the Galactic Council saw as an economic blockade, humanity was transforming into a network of unprecedented economic potential. Quantum-level economic simulations began to materialize. These weren't just predictive models, but living representations of potential economic interactions. Each simulation was a conversation, a negotiation, a form of communication that transcended traditional economic understanding. By the end of the first week, the Galactic Council's economic warfare had not just failed. It had become a catalyst for a fundamental reimagining of economic interaction. Lydia Nakamura watched the holographic displays, a slight smile playing on her lips. This was more than an economic defense. This was a declaration of a new economic paradigm. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest strength was not its ability to resist. It was its capacity to transform. Aboard the Krell-Vornak Joint Assault Carrier, Absolute Dominion, Fleet Admiral Xerax realized something was fundamentally wrong long before the first weapon fired. The carrier's quantum-enhanced threat assessment systems began to produce impossible readings. What should have been clear tactical projections dissolved into cascading uncertainty. It was as if the very fabric of military predictability had been unraveled. Commander Sarah Reyes, stationed at Earth's Orbital Defense Coordination Center, watched the incoming fleet with a clinical detachment that would have unnerved most military strategists. Her team wasn't preparing for a traditional defense. They were orchestrating a paradigm shift. The incoming fleet represented the combined military might of three of the most technologically advanced species in the Galactic Council. Thousands of ships, each capable of planetary destruction, moved with a precision that had subjugated countless civilizations over millennia. What they didn't understand was that humanity had long since moved beyond traditional military thinking. The first wave of defensive response wasn't a weapon. It was information. Quantum-encrypted data packets began to penetrate the approaching fleet's communication systems. These weren't traditional cyber attacks. They were living, adaptive information streams that simultaneously analyzed, disrupted, and transformed the fleet's internal communication matrices. Fleet Admiral Xerax watched in mounting horror as his ship's most advanced tactical systems began to negotiate. Not fight, not resist. Negotiate. The defensive platforms surrounding Earth were nothing like the static weapon systems the alien fleet expected. They were a distributed, adaptive network that understood conflict as a form of communication rather than a binary state of destruction. Each defensive satellite was more than a weapon. It was a complex neural network capable of instantaneous threat assessment, adaptation, and response. They didn't just intercept incoming threats, they understood them. Commander Reyes activated the primary defense protocol, codenamed Adaptive Resonance. The first wave of alien missiles encountered something entirely unexpected. Instead of traditional energy shields or kinetic deflectors, they found themselves navigating through a living, breathing defensive matrix that seemed to anticipate their every movement. Quantum entanglement systems created defensive bubbles that weren't just protective barriers. They were complex information processing networks that could analyze, predict, and neutralize threats at a fundamental quantum level. "They're not seeing a defense," Rise murmured to her tactical coordinator. "They're experiencing a conversation." The Krell-Vornak fleet's most advanced targeting systems began to produce increasingly erratic results. Weapon lock sequences failed. Tactical projections dissolved into quantum uncertainty. It was as if the very laws of military engagement had been rewritten. Aboard the Absolute Dominion, Fleet Admiral Zirax's neural interface began to produce physiological stress responses unprecedented in his 3 centuries of military service. The human defensive system wasn't just blocking their attack. It was fundamentally challenging their entire understanding of conflict. Defensive satellites began to emit complex quantum communication signals. These weren't traditional jamming frequencies. They were adaptive information streams that simultaneously analyzed the fleet's technological infrastructure, identified potential communication pathways, and began to establish alternative interaction protocols. The first alien ships to approach Earth's defensive perimeter found themselves caught in a web of quantum uncertainty. Weapon systems would activate, then instantaneously deactivate. Navigation protocols would lock, then dissolve. It wasn't that humanity was preventing the attack. They were transforming the very concept of attack. Commander Rice watched as the defensive network began its most complex operation. Each satellite, each defensive node, was communicating, not just with Earth's systems, but with the incoming fleet itself. The aliens were about to learn that humanity's greatest military innovation wasn't a weapon. It was understanding. By the time the first alien commander realized what was happening, the invasion had already been transformed into something entirely unexpected. This wasn't a battle. This was first contact redefined. And humanity was just getting started. Dr. Amara Okonkwo stood before a holographic display that was less a technological interface and more a living tapestry of human cognitive innovation. The Xenop Psychological Warfare Research Center in Lagos was humanity's most classified facility, a place where the boundaries between communication, psychology, and strategic intelligence blurred into something entirely unprecedented. Information is not just a weapon, she explained to her team of neurological architects and communication specialists. It's a living ecosystem. The team assembled represented the pinnacle of human interdisciplinary thinking. Linguists sat beside quantum information theorists. Neuroscientists collaborated with cultural anthropologists. Each member wore a neural interface that allowed instantaneous, multidimensional communication, a technology so advanced it made traditional communication look like primitive smoke signals. Their target was not just the Galactic Council's communication infrastructure. Their objective was to fundamentally restructure the psychological foundations of interstellar diplomacy. The first wave of their strategy emerged not as an attack, but as a series of meticulously crafted information packets. These were not simple data streams or propaganda. They were living, adaptive communication matrices designed to interact with the neural and cultural infrastructures of each alien species. For the Zorn, a species that communicated through complex biochemical and electromagnetic resonances, the team developed information packets that would trigger deep evolutionary memory patterns, ancient cultural traumas, forgotten evolutionary challenges. Collective memory nodes that had been dormant for millennia began to resurface. The Shadow Collective's communication networks encountered something far more insidious. Information streams that didn't just communicate but evolved in real time, adapting to the most minute fluctuations in their communication protocols. Dr. Okonkwo's primary innovation was understanding that psychological warfare was not about destruction, it was about transformation. Each information packet was a complex neural algorithm. They didn't just transmit information, they created conversation pathways that would fundamentally challenge the existing power structures within the Galactic Council. Hidden within these streams were carefully constructed narrative architectures, historical references that would trigger specific emotional responses. philosophical challenges that would expose fundamental contradictions in the Council's governance models. The Krell's communication networks, built on millennia of hierarchical information control, began to experience unprecedented disruptions, not through direct attacks, but through a process of narrative deconstruction so subtle that traditional defensive protocols were utterly useless. "We're not breaking their systems," Dr. Okonkwo explained to her lead researcher, Dr. Miguel Rodriguez. "We're helping them see the limitations of their own perspectives." Quantum encrypted communication channels began to proliferate. These were living narratives that could adapt, evolve, and transform in real time. Information streams that understood the neural and cultural infrastructures of each alien species better than they understood themselves. For the first time in galactic history, psychological warfare became a form of collective therapy. Ancient rivalries between Council species began to resurface, not through aggressive manipulation, but through a process of collective memory restoration. Buried historical narratives, forgotten cultural traumas, unresolved evolutionary challenges emerged with surgical precision. The team's neural interfaces allowed for levels of collaborative thinking that defied traditional understanding. They weren't just analyzing information. They were creating living communication ecosystems that could navigate the most complex psychological terrains. Ambassador Exedal of the Shadow Collective was the first to truly comprehend the magnitude of what was happening. The human communication strategy wasn't an attack. It was a fundamental reimagining of interspecies communication. Narrative streams began to expose the deep-seated contradictions within the Galactic Council's governance models, not through aggressive rhetoric, but through a process of collective self-reflection, so profound that it threatened to unravel centuries of established power structures. Dr. Rodriguez activated the final phase of their strategy. Information packets that were less communication and more a form of collective consciousness exploration. The Galactic Council was about to learn that humanity's most potent weapon was not technological superiority. It was the capacity to understand and transform. The Galactic Reconfiguration Summit convened in a space unlike any diplomatic gathering in recorded history. The venue itself was a marvel. A quantum-stabilized meeting chamber that existed simultaneously across multiple dimensional planes, allowing for levels of communication that transcended traditional linguistic and perceptual barriers. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center, not as a supplicant, but as an architect of transformation. Her proposal was elegantly simple yet devastatingly complex. It wasn't a plan for human dominance, but a comprehensive restructuring of interstellar governance that would fundamentally challenge every existing paradigm of cooperation. Ambassador Lirak of the Methane Breathing Consortium was the first to truly comprehend the magnitude of what was being proposed. The human document before them was not a diplomatic treaty. It was a living blueprint for a fundamentally new type of civilization. The core of the proposal focused on three revolutionary concepts. First, a dynamic governance model that rejected static hierarchical structures. Instead, it proposed a fluid, adaptive system of representation that could instantaneously reconfigure based on collective needs, technological capabilities, and evolutionary potential. Second, a complete reimagining of resource allocation. The traditional galactic economic model, built on scarcity and controlled distribution, would be replaced by a network of collaborative innovation. Resources would be viewed not as commodities to be hoarded, but as collaborative potential waiting to be unlocked. Third, and most radical, a communication infrastructure that treated information as a living ecosystem rather than a controlled commodity. Every species would have direct access to a quantum-encrypted network that allowed for unprecedented levels of transparent, instantaneous communication. Dr. Arya Chen, standing beside Elena, activated a holographic demonstration that would fundamentally challenge everything the Council understood about technological potential. The display wasn't a static presentation. It was a living, breathing representation of potential futures. Millions of potential evolutionary paths materialized simultaneously, each one a complex tapestry of interdependent possibilities. Smaller civilizations within the Galactic Council began to take notice. The crystalline nomads, long marginalized by the dominant species, saw in this proposal a path to genuine representation. The Quantum Collective, whose technological capabilities had been systematically suppressed, recognized a framework that celebrated innovation rather than controlling it. Ambassador Exedal of the Shadow Collective experienced something unprecedented. The human proposal was triggering deep neural responses that challenged fundamental assumptions about governance, communication, and collective potential. "This is not a treaty," Elena explained, her voice modulated to resonate with the unique neural frequencies of each species present. "This is an invitation to reimagine what civilization can become." The quantum adaptive chamber began to resonate with collective potential. Information streams flowed not as controlled narratives, but as living, collaborative explorations of possibility. Dr. Marcus Chen's team had prepared something extraordinary. The proposal wasn't just a document. It was a self-evolving system that could adapt in real time to the collective responses of those engaging with it. Each species saw something different in the proposal. The methane-breathing consortium saw a path to environmental restoration. The Quantum Collective saw unprecedented technological collaboration. The smaller, marginalized species saw a framework that rejected centuries of systemic oppression. Ambassador Krelvex, who had participated in hundreds of diplomatic gatherings across millennia, felt something he had never experienced before: genuine hope. The human proposal didn't just challenge the existing system. It demonstrated a fundamentally different approach to collective potential. It wasn't about human superiority. It was about collective transformation. Area Chen's neural interface captured the microscopic shifts in the chamber. Quantum-level communication pathways were being fundamentally rewired. This was more than a diplomatic meeting. This was the birth of a new understanding of civilization itself. As the demonstration concluded, the chamber fell into a silence more profound than any diplomatic moment in galactic history. The Galactic Council was about to learn that humanity's most revolutionary act was not conquest. It was imagination. 1,000 standard cycles after the Galactic Reconfiguration Summit, the consequences of humanity's intervention had transformed civilization in ways no one could have predicted. The Nexus Station, a massive orbital complex that served as the new center of interstellar governance, was a testament to the radical transformation. Unlike traditional diplomatic centers, this was a living, breathing ecosystem of collaborative potential. Its very architecture challenged every previous concept of institutional design. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, now serving as the primary human representative to the collaborative governance network, walked through corridors that were more alive than mechanical. Adaptive matter walls shifted and responded to the collective emotional and intellectual states of those within them. Information flows were visible as luminescent streams, representing the real-time exchange of ideas across multiple species and dimensional planes. The station's central chamber was a marvel of quantum engineering. No fixed points of authority existed. Representatives from over 200 species moved through a dynamic space where leadership was a fluid, adaptive concept. Traditional hierarchies had been completely dismantled. Ambassador Area Chen, who had been a young researcher during the initial confrontation, now led the Interspecies Communication Research Division. Her team had developed communication technologies that made their previous breakthroughs look primitive. Neural interfaces allowed for levels of understanding that transcended linguistic and biological barriers. The smaller species that had once been marginalized now played critical roles in galactic decision-making. The quantum nomads, once a footnote in galactic records, had become leaders in adaptive governance research. The Crystalline Consortium developed technologies that integrated collective consciousness with computational systems in ways that defied previous understanding. But this was not a human victory in the traditional sense. It was a collective transformation. Dr. Marcus Chen's descendant, Dr. Kai Chen, presented the latest breakthrough in collaborative technology, a living network that could instantaneously adapt to complex systemic challenges. Climate restoration projects on multiple planets proceeded simultaneously, healing ecological systems that had been considered beyond repair for millennia. The economic systems that once drove conflict now facilitated unprecedented levels of collective innovation. Resources were no longer hoarded, but viewed as collaborative potential. Every technological breakthrough was instantaneously shared, creating a network of collective advancement that accelerated progress exponentially. The military structures that had once defined galactic interactions had been completely reimagined. Defensive capabilities were now primarily focused on systemic resilience and collective protection. Conflict resolution happened through complex communication networks that could neutralize potential tensions before they could escalate. Ambassador Exedal of the Shadow Collective, now a key architect of the new governance model, reflected on the transformation. What had begun as a confrontation had become a fundamental reimagining of collective potential. The quantum adaptive communication networks developed during the initial confrontation had evolved into something far more profound. They were now living ecosystems of collective intelligence, allowing for levels of understanding that transcended individual species limitations. Elena Rodriguez, watching the dynamic governance chamber, understood the true nature of their achievement. This was not about human superiority. It was about demonstrating a different approach to collective evolution. The smaller details told the most profound story. A methane-breathing researcher collaborated with a silicon-based life form on a complex planetary restoration project. Quantum communication interfaces allowed for levels of collaboration that would have been impossible mere generations ago. Dr. Arya Chen's team had developed communication technologies that allowed for genuine empathy across biological boundaries. Neural interfaces that could translate not just language, but emotional and cognitive experiences. The galactic civilization that emerged was not a human creation. It was a collaborative ecosystem that celebrated diversity, innovation, and collective potential. As the adaptive matter walls of the Nexus station shifted and responded, capturing the collective emotional state of its inhabitants, one thing became clear. Humanity's greatest achievement was not conquest. It was imagination, and the willingness to transform.